It's 1968. A scientist builds a paradise, not for people, for mice. No predators, no disease. Food refills itself before it ever runs low. Water never stops flowing. Nesting material piled higher than any mouse could use in a lifetime. The temperature never changes, day or night, summer or winter. Heaven, basically. If you happen to be a mouse, he calls it Universe 25. 4 pairs of mice move in on day 1. 8 animals total, hand-picked from a disease-free colony, healthy, young, placed inside an enclosure engineered to comfortably hold thousands. The scientist's name was John B. Calhoun. By this point, he'd spent over 20 years building worlds exactly like this one for rats and mice, dozens of them, in barns, in fields, in laboratories. And every single time, the result had been the same. He wanted to know one thing. What happens to a society when nothing limits it? No hunger, no threat, no scarcity, no reason to die early. Just space, and time, and each other, stretching out indefinitely. The mice did what mice do when nothing is stopping them. They mated. The population doubled every 55 days, a clean exponential curve, the kind you'd be thrilled to see if you were running a business instead of an experiment. 62 days in, the first litters were born into Universe 25. They grew up never knowing scarcity, never knowing a day without food in the hopper. By day 315, roughly 600 mice were living inside the enclosure, climbing the stairwells between levels, queuing at feeding stations, packing into nesting boxes that were never designed to hold this many bodies at once. From the outside, looking in, it still looked exactly like paradise. Plenty of food, plenty of water, nobody starving, nobody thirsty, nobody freezing. By every measurable physical standard, every mouse in Universe 25 had everything it could possibly need. But something else had quietly run out, and nobody had thought to put a number on it, because nobody had thought it would matter. Roles. There are only so many ways to be a mouse that actually matters to other mice. Defend a territory, raise a litter, hold a place somewhere in the social order. Universe 25 had unlimited food and a completely finite amount of meaning, and by day 315, there were already more mice than there were roles for mice to fill. The young males felt it first, because they always do. They reached adulthood and tried to do what male mice are built to do: establish a territory, defend it, attract a mate. Except every spot worth having was already claimed by an older male with no intention of ever giving it up. They couldn't fight their way in either. There were too many of them now, packed too close together, for any single fight to actually settle anything the way it would have in a smaller, less crowded world. So, gradually, they stopped trying. They withdrew toward the center of the enclosure, gathering in tangled, restless heaps of bodies, dozens of males piled together with nowhere else to be. They attacked each other in sudden, pointless bursts, for no clear reason that any observer could identify, and then they groomed themselves obsessively in the long silences that followed, over and over, as if grooming was the only behavior left that still made sense to them. Calhoun's team watched the females change too, and just as dramatically. With no males successfully defending territory around them anymore, with no stable structure left to rely on, many retreated entirely alone to nesting boxes on the upper levels of the enclosure. They sealed themselves off. They became aggressive toward their own young in ways that had never been documented in earlier, less crowded colonies. Some abandoned litters they would once have raised without a second thought, simply walking away mid-task, as if the instinct itself had been interrupted and never came back online. And then came the group Calhoun would later name the Beautiful Ones. Healthy, unmarked, completely untouched by the violence spreading through the rest of the enclosure, because they had simply opted out of everything. No mating, no fighting, no defending territory, no raising young, nothing at all except eating, sleeping, and grooming their own fur for hours at a stretch, every single day, with a kind of narcissistic, repetitive precision. They ate well. They slept well. They were, by every physical measure available to Calhoun's team, the picture of health. Calhoun would say later that they were the most beautiful mice he had ever seen in any of his colonies, and also the most hollow, because underneath the fur there was nothing left. No drive, no instinct toward anything beyond the next meal and the next grooming session. Cannibalism started turning up in the records around this stage. So did infant mortality, climbing past 90% in the most crowded sections of the enclosure. So did males indiscriminately mounting other males, females, juveniles, anything nearby, because the social signals that had once organized mating and territory and hierarchy had broken down so completely that almost nothing was left to regulate behavior at all. By day 600, the population of Universe 25 peaked at 2,200 mice, and here's the detail that should stop you. The enclosure was never full. There was still physical space left. Universe 25 did not collapse because it ran out of room. It collapsed because it ran out of structure first, long before it ran out of space, and the two are very different things. After the peak, the numbers didn't level off and stabilize the way a healthy population would. They started falling, and they kept falling, because nothing was replacing the mice that died of old age. Young mice raised entirely inside the chaos of the overcrowded middle years had grown up without ever learning the basic social behaviors mice need to mate, to raise young, to defend a nest. They had the bodies for it. They had lost whatever else was required. The last recorded pregnancy inside Universe 25 happened around day 920. After that, nothing. Not one successful birth. Not because the surviving mice were physically incapable of reproducing, because they no longer knew how to be around each other long enough, or in the right way, to try. Calhoun called what he'd watched a behavioral sink, a kind of social gravity, where the basic desire to be near others pulls a crowd inward even as the crowding itself slowly poisons everything that crowd actually needs in order to survive and reproduce. He said the population had died two separate deaths. First, the death of the spirit, the long withdrawal, the silence, the obsessive hollow grooming of the beautiful ones, the abandoned litters, the empty hierarchy. Then, much later, only after the first death was already complete, the death of the body. The very last mouse in Universe 25 died alone on May 23, 1973, 4 years and 10 months after 8 healthy, hand-picked mice first walked into paradise. Calhoun ran versions of this same experiment more than once, on rats, on mice, across more than 2 decades of his career, and the pattern held almost every single time he tried it. Plenty of resources. Total social collapse anyway. When he finally published his findings, the conclusion read less like a research summary and more like a warning. Once the number of individuals capable of filling social roles greatly exceeds the number of roles actually available, he wrote, only disruption can follow. People took that line and ran with it, fast, and far beyond what Calhoun himself had actually claimed. Newspapers connected it directly to crowded cities, to rising global population, to a coming human collapse. Mice in a box held up as a mirror for the rest of us. Calhoun himself was considerably more careful than the headlines that followed him. He didn't think the real lesson was that crowding itself kills a society. He thought the lesson was narrower, and a good deal stranger than that. It wasn't simply the bodies packed into the room that broke Universe 25. It was the absence of anything meaningful left for all those bodies to actually do once they got there. He spent much of his later career trying to design the opposite kind of environment, enclosures that gave crowded animals room to matter, not just room to physically stand. So here's the uncomfortable part to sit with. Universe 25 never ran out of food. It never ran out of water. It never ran out of space. Not really. Not in any physical sense that mattered. What it ran out of was purpose, somewhere for all that abundant, accumulating life to actually go. A paradise with nothing left to strive for stopped functioning as a paradise almost immediately. It just took the mice 4 years and 10 months to find that out the hard way.